Hello viewers, welcome to my channel. Today I want to share a story of interpreter of Maladies which was written by Jhumpa Lahiri. Jhumpa Lahiri, born on July 11th in the year of 1967, London, UK. She is an American author known for her short stories, novels and essays in English, more recently in Italy. Her notable works are Interpreter of Maladies, The Namesake, and The Lowland. And our notable awards are Henry Award, Pulitzer Prize. Well, The Interpreter of Maladies is a book of 9 stories, and our story, Interpreter of Maladies, is a third part among those 9 stories. And this Interpreter of Maladies will know today. And the characters involved in this Interpreter of Maladies are Mr. Kapsi. Mr. Kapsi, the Indian tour guide who accompanies Mrs. Das and Mr. Das family. And next character is Mrs. Meena Das. Mrs. Meena Das is a self-absorbed wife of Mr. Das, and she cares only of herself and her needs. Next, Mr. Das is a middle school science teacher who accompanies Mr. Kapsi as a tour guide for their tour. Next, Bobby, Roni, and Tina are the children of Mrs. Das and Mr. Das. Bobby and Roni are the sons, and Tina is their daughter. Bobby is not actually the Mr. Das child, and Roni prefers always to follow his rules and he never listen to his parents. Tina misbehaves and seeking her mother's attention, but she fails. Coming to the plot, coming to the summary, Mrs. Das and Mr. Das, Indian Americans, actually their proper is India and stays in the America. They visit India for a tour, and there accompanies Mr. Kapsi as a tour guide for the days as a tour. Mr. Kapsi notes that the immaturity of Mrs. Das and Mr. Das as they look at young and childish while talking to their children, and with indifferently, with selfish. On the trip, Mr. Das and the children get out of the car for the sightsee, but Mrs. Das sits in the car eating snacks and offers she won't offer to anyone else, wearing a sunglasses as a barrier, and she paints her nails. When Tina comes to her and asks her to paint her nails as well, Mrs. Das turn away and rebuffs her daughter. Rebuffs in a sense rejects her daughter. Then Mr. and Mrs. Das ask the good-natured Mr. Kapsi about his job as a tour guide, and he tells them about his weekday job as an interpreter in a doctor's office. Mr. Kapsi begins to develop a romantic interest in Mrs. Kapsi and conducts a private conversation with Mrs. Da with her, and that during the trip, Mr. Kapsi imagines a future correspondence and build a relationship with her. Then, however, Mrs. Das want to reveals a secret. She reveals a secret of her with Kapsi. She tells Kapsi that she once had an affair, and Bobby was born due to her adultery. She explains and she tells the story to Mr. Kapsi because of his profession. She hopes he can understand and interpret her feelings and make her feel better. However, Mr. Kapsi reveals his disappointment to her in her and points out her guilty. Mrs. Das storms off Then Mrs. Das walks away to his family, towards his family, leaving a trail of crumbs of puffed rice and snacks, and the monkeys begins to follow the trail of cracks, and the Das family doesn't notice, due to their negligence, they doesn't notice the trail of food and the monkeys following. The monkeys follow the trail of food, and the monkeys surround the Bobby. Then Mr. Kapsi notices that the monkeys surrounding the Bobby and the food. Then Mr. Kapsi, the tour guide, runs towards him and saves Bobby. And Mr. Kapsi returns Bobby to his parents and looks on as they clean up Bobby. In this way, our Jhumpa Lahiri explains, and the main theme, the major theme of this interpreter of Maladies story is the difficulty of communication, because they don't have a proper communication. The family doesn't have a proper communication, and the parents doesn't have a proper communication with children, and even the children doesn't listen to their parents. They behave themselves. In this way, our Jhumpa Lahiri explains this story. And another theme, she highlights another theme, the danger of romanticism. While Mr. Kapsi and Mrs. Das, while they're in a relation, to build a relation, this theme is highlighted by Jhumpa Lahiri. This is the story of interpreted of Maladies. Thank you. Keep watching my channel. Thank you. Stay home. Stay safe.